Welcome. Tonight we travel not to the pyramids or the golden age of pharaohs, but to a time less spoken of, yet no less fascinating, medieval Egypt. A world of bustling bazaars, towering minarets, quiet scholars, and powerful rulers. Between the 7th and 16th centuries, Egypt was no longer the land of ancient gods, but a thriving center of the Islamic world. A crossroads of Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Close your eyes. Let the sands of time carry you into the heart of Cairo, a city alive with the scent of spices, the call to prayer, and the murmur of merchants. Imagine warm sunlight hitting limestone walls, and the distant sound of a camel bell echoing down a narrow alley. This is medieval Egypt, and tonight we will walk its streets, visit its homes, taste its food, and listen to the whispers of its history. It is early morning. The city of Al-Qahira, known to us as Cairo, slowly awakens. Children run barefoot through alleys, weaving between donkeys and vendors. A woman sweeps the steps outside her home with a bundle of date palm sticks. From above, carved wooden windows, mashrabiyas, peek over the street, offering privacy yet letting in the cool morning air. The streets are alive. You hear the adhan, the call to prayer, echo from a nearby minaret. Men in long robes and turbans walk quietly toward the mosque. Others open their shops, selling bread, fabrics, oils, and books. Homes in medieval Cairo were often 2 or 3 stories high, built with mud brick or stone. Inside, the floors were cool, covered with woven rugs. A courtyard might hold a fig tree or a small fountain. The scent of tea brewing with mint drifts from a clay pot over the fire. In the countryside, far from the capital, life moved slower. Peasants, fellahin, rose with the sun to tend wheat, barley, or cotton. Their homes were simple, mud-walled, thatched with palm leaves, but inside lived laughter, tradition, and the rhythm of the Nile. Whether in city or village, Egypt in the Middle Ages was vibrant and deeply human. Now let us peek into a kitchen. There is no refrigerator, no packaged goods, only the earth's gifts and centuries of skill. The woman of the house is preparing breakfast, flatbread, still warm from the clay oven, dipped in olive oil, accompanied by fava beans, known as foul mesdames, cooked slowly overnight in a pot buried in ashes. It is a humble but nourishing meal. Later in the day, lunch might include lentils, fresh vegetables, or meat if one could afford it. Spices, cumin, coriander, cinnamon filled the air, traded from across the Islamic world. Dates, figs, and honey sweetened many dishes. Water was drawn from the Nile, but often filtered through stone pots or sweetened with hibiscus. Those who could afford it sipped on sherbets, cold drinks made with fruit and sugar, a luxury of the time. Evenings were slower. Families gathered, sharing stories, sipping mint tea, and enjoying fresh flatbread with goat cheese or eggs boiled in ashes. Food was never just food. It was a reflection of season, class, and tradition, a rhythm of life guided by sun and prayer. In the heart of every home was the family. Fathers were often the providers, farmers, merchants, or craftsmen, but it was the women who kept the household alive. In medieval Egypt, especially under Islamic law, women held a complex position, protected by rights, yet often shaped by tradition. A woman might own land, run a business, or inherit property. Many wealthy women managed their own affairs or employed others to do so. In Cairo, some became patrons of religious schools or charities. But in most households, her world was centered on family, raising children, preparing food, and teaching values. Children were deeply loved. The birth of a child was celebrated with prayer and joy. Little boys and girls played in courtyards, mimicking adults, chasing pigeons, or crafting toys from clay and straw. At home, they learned respect. For elders, for the Quran, for tradition. Boys might one day go to school or become apprentices. Girls, especially in wealthier families, could learn to read, sew, and manage the home. Despite the passing centuries, family in medieval Egypt was a space of warmth, rhythm, and deep connection, bound by custom and belief, yet full of laughter and quiet love. As the sun rose higher, the streets filled with sound again, not of trade, but of devotion. Islam was the lifeblood of medieval Egypt. From sunrise to sunset, life moved in harmony with the 5 daily prayers. The adhan, the call to prayer, echoed through every district. The mosque was not only a place of worship, it was a school, a court, a community center. And in Cairo stood one of the greatest treasures of the Islamic world, Al-Azhar University, founded in the 10th century. Scholars from across Africa, Arabia, and even Spain came here to study. They debated law, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy under the shade of stone arches. Students sat on woven mats, copying texts by hand, their ink-stained fingers preserving knowledge for the future. Religion and education were deeply connected. To learn was to worship. To read the Quran was to listen to God's voice. Even in smaller towns and villages, children might attend a maktab, a simple school. They would memorize verses, practice penmanship on wooden tablets, and carry their lessons home beneath the warm Egyptian sun. Now let us return to the city. By midday, Cairo's heart was alive with commerce. The bazaar, or souk, was a living organism, a maze of stalls, shouts, smells, and color. You would hear the clink of copper pots being sold, the hum of tailors sewing silks, the bargaining between a woman and a spice merchant over a pouch of saffron. Every corner offered something new. Glassmakers blowing delicate vases, scribes copying poetry for a dinar, leather workers tanning hides in the heat of the sun. Cairo was famous for its textiles, perfumes, and books. Goods from India, sub-Saharan Africa, and the Mediterranean all passed through its gates. The Nile carried grains and papyrus, while camel caravans brought gold, salt, and incense across the desert. To walk through a medieval Egyptian market was to touch the threads that tied the entire Islamic world together. Not far from the bustling market stood stone citadels, silent, proud, and heavy with history. Inside walked men who once had no names, no homes, no freedom, but who would one day rule all of Egypt. They were the Mamluks. Originally foreign boys taken from the Caucasus, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe, they were trained from youth in the arts of war, horsemanship, and strict loyalty. Converted to Islam and educated in Arabic, they became elite soldiers, and in time they became rulers. By the 13th century, the Mamluks overthrew their former masters and established their own sultanate, ruling Egypt for nearly 300 years. Under their reign, Egypt flourished. They drove back the Mongols, halted the Crusaders, and built some of Cairo's most beautiful architecture. They raised schools, mosques, and hospitals, structures carved with stone lace and crowned with domes. But the Mamluks were also fierce. Power changed hands by the sword, not by inheritance. Sultans came and went with the tides of loyalty, betrayal, and ambition. Yet in the chaos, a strange stability endured. The Mamluks protected Egypt's place in the world, not only as a military power, but as a cultural jewel of the medieval Islamic world. As the sun begins to set, the sounds of Cairo soften. Shadows stretch along the walls. The call to Maghrib prayer echoes once more. A candle flickers behind a carved window screen. Families gather indoors. A father tells a tale of Alexander the Great. A mother hums a lullaby passed down for generations. In the streets, lanterns glow faintly. The bazaar closes its gates. Scholars still sit by their lamps copying knowledge by hand. The Nile flows steadily outside the city walls, silent witness to empires, prayers, and time itself. And so ends a day in medieval Egypt, not a land of pyramids and ancient kings, but of calligraphers and camel drivers, of mothers and warriors, of bread and ink and prayer. Beyond the walls of Cairo, past the villages and mosques, lies the vast golden silence of the desert. Here the air is dry and still. Only the wind speaks, whistling through sand dunes and whispering across ancient caravan roads. In medieval Egypt, the desert was not empty. It was a highway of trade, pilgrimage, and adventure. Caravans of hundreds of camels would journey for weeks, carrying spices, ivory, silk, gold, and salt. They moved slowly, guided by stars, stopping at ancient wells. Bedouin guides, dressed in flowing robes, knew every dune and danger. In the night they gathered by fire, sharing tea, reciting poetry, and guarding their goods from thieves and spirits. For pilgrims on the Hajj, the desert was sacred ground. Each step brought them closer to Mecca and closer to the divine. To cross the desert was to surrender to its rhythm. To walk among its sands was to feel small and yet timeless. Even today, buried beneath centuries of silence, those caravan paths remain etched in stone and memory, proof that Egypt was never isolated but connected to the entire medieval world by sand, stars, and story. In the quiet corners of medieval Egypt, art was not just decoration. It was devotion, identity, and silence made visible. The calligrapher, hunched over his parchment, dipped his reed pen into black ink made from soot and honey. With every stroke of Arabic script, he traced not just letters, but the rhythm of the divine. Books were precious, handwritten, hand-bound, sometimes illuminated with gold. Poetry danced on their pages, and the names of ancient philosophers, doctors, and mystics lived again in ink. On city walls, geometric patterns and arabesques covered surfaces like flowing water, never showing people or animals, but revealing infinite symmetry, a reflection of God's perfection through art. Perfumes were also a kind of art. Rosewater, sandalwood, musk, distilled in tiny shops and worn by rich and poor alike. The scent of a person was a kind of presence, a soft memory left behind in a room or on a prayer mat. Even in the humblest homes, beauty had a place. A carved wooden spoon, a painted ceramic bowl, a woven basket of date leaves. Each spoke of care, craft, and a desire to bring grace into daily life. In medieval Egypt, art was everywhere, not in statues of kings, but in the quiet hands of the living. All lives, no matter how vibrant, end in silence. But in medieval Egypt, death was not feared. It was prepared for, prayed for, and understood. When someone passed, the body was washed gently, wrapped in a white shroud, and carried through the streets. Neighbors and strangers alike joined the procession. For in death, every soul was equal. The graveyard lay just outside the city walls. Rows of domed tombs, some grand, some simple. Prayers were whispered, dates and water were given to the poor in memory of the dead. Some families lit lamps near the grave for 7 nights, hoping their light would guide the soul into mercy. Egyptian Muslims believed in the day of judgment, when all souls would rise and stand before God. Until then, the grave was not just an ending, but a waiting place. People often gave to charity in the name of the deceased. A well dug, a tree planted, a Quran gifted to a school. These were called sadaqah jariyah, a charity that lives on, even after death. To die in peace, with prayer on the lips and loved ones nearby, was one of the greatest blessings. And so the Egyptians of the Middle Ages lived not in fear of death, but in gentle dialogue with it. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey through medieval Egypt. If you enjoyed this video, If it brought you calm, curiosity, or a moment of wonder, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps this quiet corner of history reach more people and brings more stories like this to life. Until next time, rest well, dream deep, and may the ancient sands of time whisper softly in your sleep. Good night.